Some time ago, my friends started getting into tabletop games. At first, it just started to be some of the more popular games in recent years, but then they started to bring in more and more new games. But through all these games that came through, there was one game that really stuck for me. One game that was the one. That game was Unmatched. So what is Unmatched? Well, Restoration Games, the creators of Unmatched, call Unmatched a miniature dueling game. Unmatched at its most basic level is a bunch of different fighters. These fighters all have their individual deck that comes with them that you use to battle. Each fighter's deck is unique to them and has its own unique properties. Additionally, each individual fighter has their one unique special ability to add more distinctiveness to that one particular character. So I'm going to go ahead and show you the basics of Unmatched here, what is going on with all the characters, and show you how a basic playthrough of this would work. The set that I'm going to use to demonstrate all of this is the Battle of Legends Volume 1, which is the original set. Currently, most of the Unmatched sets are characters from literature or from legend. We've got like King Arthur, Sinbad, Medusa, and Alice from Alice in Wonderland who are in this set. We've also got some other sets to come along like Cobble and Fog, which gives you some Victorian British era literature characters. You have sets like Robin Hood versus Bigfoot and Little Red versus Beowulf, which give you some additional characters. And then there are a few licensed sets in there, like Jurassic Park and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. There is a single Bruce Lee set that just has Bruce by himself. There are also a number of upcoming Marvel sets where there's going to be quite a few Marvel characters, including Deadpool, who's going to be in his own little standalone pack. So we'll take a look at what all is there with a typical fighter. We'll see that we'll have our hero themselves. In this case, it is King Arthur, who is this nice miniature here with the colored base on it. Arthur has one sidekick, in this case Merlin. There's some characters that will have a single strong sidekick. There's some characters like Medusa that will have multiple sidekicks, but they will generally be weaker sidekicks and not as strong as a single. And although we don't have any of those in this particular set, there are a number of characters that don't have a sidekick, such as Invisible Man, Jekyll and Hyde, Bruce Lee. We see that we'll have a health dial here for our main character and the sidekick. And one thing you will see as we look through different characters is that different characters will have different healths on them, such as King Arthur is one of the stronger ones from a health standpoint, in that he is up to 18. Alice has a health of 13, so she starts off a little bit lower than Arthur. We'll see that Merlin also has his own separate health dial here. The characters that have multiple sidekicks like Medusa, Robin Hood, and Dracula, each of their sidekicks has just one health point assigned to each of them, so they don't have a health dial. We'll see on this card here most of the information that we need about the character. We've got the health for Arthur and Merlin. We'll see their move, which is how many spaces they can move. We see if they are melee or ranged. Melee means you can attack somebody adjacent to you. Ranged means that you can hit anyone in the same colored zone that you are in. Such as in this scenario right here, King Arthur could not attack Alice as they sit right now because they are not in adjacent spaces, and King Arthur is melee. Merlin is ranged, and since Alice is in the green and blue zones here, which Merlin is in, Merlin can actually attack her from that position. We'll get into the special abilities a bit. I'm going to go ahead and go over the deck first because a lot of special abilities have to deal with the things that are in the deck. Generally, what you'll see on the card is going to be a color and a symbol up here that will tell you what type of card this is. On most of the cards, you'll see a number up here that will tell you what the value of this card is. We have a boost value on here, which we'll go over in a bit. And then we have the effects down here. You're going to see 4 different types of cards. You're going to see attack cards, which will be red and will have this kind of burst symbol on it there. Those are used for attacking. We will see defense cards, which will be blue and will have a shield. This is for use when someone attacks you. We have this, which has half of a shield and half of the burst and is purple. This is a versatile card that can be used for an attack or for defense. You can think that this is purple because purple is made up of blue and red. And then you have scheme cards, which is yellow with the lightning bolt. They don't have a number on them. These are cards that just do something for you. You'll also see on your cards a name right here. This name will tell you which of your characters can use them. In this case, this card could be used by King Arthur. This card could be used by Merlin, and this card that says any could be used by either Merlin or Arthur. On the back of your card here, we have everything that you can do on your turn. We have maneuver, which will draw a card out of your deck and potentially move your fighter around the number of spaces. You can play a scheme card, or you can attack someone with either an attack or versatile card. You don't use your defense cards on your turn. This will be done on other characters' turn when they are fighting you. All right, so let's go ahead and go through a scenario here with Arthur and Sinbad. Let's say Arthur, for his first turn, decides to maneuver. The first part of maneuver is you draw a card. Then you can move up to however many spaces you have listed on here, which would be 2 in Arthur's case. You can move up to 2 spaces. You can decide to discard a card to boost your maneuver. Let's say Arthur was back here and really needed to get up to Sinbad. He could maneuver for 2 and use this card and use that boost value right there, not this number up here, but the boost value, to get another 2 spaces up there to Sinbad. So that's a way to be able to maneuver a little bit further. But just remember, on a maneuver, you have to draw a card and then you can move. And that is important to remember, that you have to draw a card and that moving your fighter is actually optional. You can choose just to draw a card. You have to do 2 turns, which means that if you have no scheme card to play and that you are in a position that you cannot attack, you have to maneuver, and that means you have to draw a card. Okay, this will become important later on as I explain some things about the deck. So Arthur will say that he is attacking and will place a card like this to say that he's attacking. Then Sinbad gets to decide what he is going to do. If Sinbad has a defense card, either a blue defense card or one of the purple versatiles, he can choose to defend. If he doesn't have any, he has to not defend and just say that he is not defending. He can, however, place down a card to defend with. You do not have to defend just because you have defense cards. You may choose not to, and there may be reasons to do that. We'll then flip these cards over and see what we have here. We have, in this case, an attack of 1 and a defense of 4, which means that Sinbad has successfully defended. So since he's successfully defended, he doesn't take any damage. The attacker doesn't take any damage from that. So then we're going to go down here to these card effects and look at those. There are 3 things it could say down here. It could say immediately, it could say after combat, or it could say during combat. And that is the order that they would happen, would be immediately, during, and after. If you have 2 things that say the same thing, then the defender happens first. Now in this case, we have 2 after combats. So Sinbad's after combat would happen first, and then Arthur's after combat. Sinbad's after combat would be, if you won the combat, choose one of the fighters in the combat and move them up to 4 spaces. So Sinbad can move himself up to 4 spaces, anywhere that he wants to for 4 spaces. He could choose to move Arthur up to 4 spaces. He kind of likes where he's sitting, and he wants to go ahead and push Arthur away, and he wants to separate him from Merlin up here, so he'll push him 1, 2, 3, down there. Get him away from Merlin there, because it's up to 4 spaces. You don't have to go 4. Then Arthur's ability is draw 1 card. If you won the combat, draw 2 instead. Well, he did not win the combat, so he only draws the 1 card. As far as winning and losing combat, it's also important to point out that in the case of a tie, the defender wins for card effects. So that is important to note. So let's go ahead and put Arthur back here, and let's play this out a little bit differently. Let's say that that card is placed, and we'll go ahead and do that card. We'll play these again. In this case, Arthur has a momentous shift, which is a versatile of 3, and Sinbad has played leap away once again. And so you would be like, okay, looking at the numbers here, it would appear that Sinbad has won because it is 4 and a 3 here. But we have to go down here to the effects. Now we have a during combat and an after, so the during will happen first. So this is Arthur's during combat. If your fighter started his turn in a different space, this card's value is 5. Well, this was the second move for Arthur, because his first was maneuvering. So he started here and is now here. So this card is, in fact, a 5 now instead of a 3. So Sinbad has now lost this. So since this is a 5 and this is a 4, you would take Sinbad's health dial here and you would knock him down to 14 because he took a hit. Then Sinbad's ability to move one of the fighters up to 4 spaces can still happen. He can still go move Arthur out or move himself out just the same. Let's say that he had played a different card. Let's say that Sinbad played this card, a feint. Well, now this isn't immediately. So this immediately would happen first, which is cancel all effects on your opponent's card. So the effects are all canceled now. So this doesn't have a chance to turn into a 5. It just stays a 3. Now in this case, it isn't going to make a whole lot of difference in the battle there, because Sinbad is still going to take 1 hit because the 3 is still higher than the 2. But it is important to know that he did cancel the momentous shift and kept it from being a 5. If Arthur were to play something like this here, which is a 4, after combat draw 2 cards, his feint would kick in first and cancel the effects on this card, and then Arthur wouldn't draw the 2 cards. Sinbad would take the 2 damage, but Arthur wouldn't get to draw his cards. Let's say it's Sinbad's turn and he's managed to maneuver up here to Merlin. He can play an attack card, and then Merlin can defend. We'll flip these over here. We have 2 effects on Merlin's here. This says a 0, but during combat, prevent all damage. So while this is a 5, it would normally deal quite a bit of damage to Merlin. Since Merlin has prevented all damage, he ends up not taking any damage there, so that 5 is ignored. And then you can place Merlin in any space and go stick him wherever else because of the after combat effect. And you're like, yeah, I'm going to attack with a 5 and hit Merlin hard. And then you're like, oh no, Merlin has just completely undone that. Now, if Sinbad were to have attacked with a feint, which has the immediately cancel all effects on your opponent's card, since this is an immediate and this is during, immediate happens first, so he cancels out all of that, and now Merlin is just sitting here with a 0 card. The Merlin and Arthur player being like, oh yeah, I'm going to cancel that, and this card being like, yeah, not so fast. Now you've got basically no defense since that's a 0, and you would take 2 hits, and you'd have to take Merlin's dial and drop him down 2. So the main thing to remember when dealing with effects on cards is that it goes immediate, during combat, and after combat. If you have 2 that happen at the same time, the defender's cards happen first. Okay, so we got these health dials, so what happens when they get down to 0? Well, if your hero goes down to 0, they're dead and the game is over. You have lost. If your sidekick goes down to 0, you just remove the sidekick from the game and you keep on trucking. The game isn't over when the sidekick is lost. So let's go ahead and take a look at these scheme cards. The scheme card can be played on your turn. This isn't an attack, that's why it doesn't have a value up there. They do have a boost value, or most of them will have boost values, such as this card here can be played by Merlin. Command the storms, move each fighter up to 3 spaces. This includes opposing fighters. So you can play that and just move every character on the board up to 3 spaces to completely reconfigure the board. That's really quite a powerful card. We have another scheme here, Prophecy. Look at the top 4 cards of your deck, add 2 of them to your hand, and put the other 2 back on top of your deck in any order. This lets you draw 2 cards off the top of your deck and see what your next 2 cards are going to be, so that is really awesome. We can look at Sinbad's deck, and he'll have a card here, which is Riches Beyond Compare. Draw 3 cards. It just gives you 3 cards, but that's turning in 1 card and getting 3. In your hand at the beginning of the game, you start off with 5 cards. At the end of your turn, you can have up to 7 cards. Now, it does say that down here, at the end of your turn, discard down to 7 cards. So if you have 8 at the end of your turn, you're going to have to discard one of these and get rid of one of those. Each of the characters has 30 cards in their deck. When you reach the bottom of the deck and you pick up that last card out of there, this is not one of those games where you take your discard pile, shuffle it, and stick it back there. You are out of cards once you run out of cards. So what does that mean? Well, that means you are now gone into exhaustion, and you don't want to go into exhaustion. Exhaustion means that you are going to take 2 damage anytime you have to draw a card. And that is why this mandatory draw card when you're maneuvering is a big deal. So you want to make sure that your opponents are always drawing when they are maneuvering. And if you get to a point where you have no other cards in your deck, now if you've run out of cards in your deck and you don't have a scheme card in your hand and you're not sitting in a position where you can attack, then you have to maneuver and you have to take that 2 damage. If you start seeing that you have a bunch of cards and your opponent is getting close to exhaustion, it may be time to start evading and just make them die from exhaustion. If you see that you are running out of cards and your opponent still has a lot, you need to start making moves really quick or you're gonna die. So let's start looking at some of these characters' special abilities. For King Arthur, it's when King Arthur attacks, you may boost that attack. Play the boost card face down along with your attack card. If your opponent cancels the effects of your attack card, the boost is discarded with that effect. So let's say Arthur's going to attack Sinbad. He could say, I'm attacking and I'm boosting my attack. And then Sinbad defends. We would see that Arthur is attacking with Excalibur, which has a value of 6, and we'll see that he's boosting with Noble Sacrifice, which has a boost value of 3, so this would be an attack of 9, and Sinbad is going to defend with a 4, which means he would take a hit of 5, which would be a lot. Now, as it says on Arthur's card, if your opponent cancels the effects on the attack card, the boost card is discarded without effect, so if he were to play the Feint, that would end up canceling this card here, and that would just discard, and it would just be the 6 versus the 2, which would make it 4 damage that Sinbad would take, since it would be 6 versus 2. Sinbad has, when you maneuver, it's +1 for each voyage card in your discard pile. Sinbad has a bunch of these cards that are marked as voyages. as these voyage cards go into his discard pile, his maneuver will get more and more. So if he has 4 of these in his discard pile, you would add 4 to his maneuver, which means he can maneuver 6, which means he can start maneuvering around that board really, really fast. Alice has a big and small marker. When she is small, she has +1 defense. When she is big, she has +2 attack. She has cards that will change her from big to small, and she has this nice token here to show when she is big or small. Medusa has, at the start of a turn, you can deal damage to 1 opposing fighter in Medusa's zone, which means if Medusa is sitting right here, she could decide to deal 1 damage to any of these 3 since they are all in her zone. They are all on both the blue and the green, which is zones that she is in. The Porter over here, which is Sinbad's sidekick, is in this brown zone and it's not in Medusa's zone, so she doesn't get to deal damage to him. And all the other characters have various different special abilities. Now, what is nice about all the different sets on this is that the characters in the different sets can all interact with each other. You can take the characters from the various different games, such as you can decide that you want to have Beowulf up against King Arthur, and the fact that they're in different sets doesn't matter. You can even take the board from the Beowulf and Little Red set and use that for King Arthur versus Beowulf if you feel like it. The 2-pack games will just have 2-player boards. The 4-pack games will have 4-player boards. But even the licensed sets can mix. For example, you can play the Raptors from the Jurassic Park set up against King Arthur if you felt like it. You don't have to just play them with Muldoon that came with them. You can even mix the different license sets. You could have Bruce Lee go up against the Raptors, or you could have someone from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer set, like have Buffy or Willow go up against Bruce Lee or the Raptors. You can mix anybody, you can use any of the maps, and that gives you a lot of different ways that this game can be done. And that's a basic look at the game right there. So to give you a quick look at my favorite character from each set, we have Alice, who has the ability to change from large and small, and has the Jabberwock, who is a pretty good sidekick. We have Sherlock Holmes from the Cobble and Fog set, who has Dr. Watson, who is actually a very strong sidekick, and also has the very scheming cards that let you outwit your opponent by looking at what cards they have and figuring out what they're going to play. Bigfoot from the Robin Hood versus Bigfoot set, who is just really beefy, has a lot of maneuverability, has the Jackalope, who has a couple of cool cards. Little Red from the Little Red versus Beowulf set, who has a ranged sidekick, but also has cards that have different abilities on them if you can match the symbol on it with the card that you're playing. From the Jurassic Park set, we have the Ingen or Muldoon set, who has a bunch of ranged workers and has traps that he can set that make it more difficult for other players to maneuver around. Of course, Bruce Lee, who is in a individual character pack by himself, who is able to gain actions to make a bunch of combos with his cards and get that extra mobility at the end of his turn. And Buffy from the Buffy the Vampire Slayer set, who is able to move through spaces that opposing fighters are in, which you normally can't do, and also has 2 different sidekicks. One who has a lot of scheme cards and the other that give you extra defense and attack cards. So that's Unmatched in a nutshell. If you have any more questions about the game, you can leave those thoughts down in the comments. I've also got videos for a lot of the other fighters so you can learn more about those. So be sure to give a thumbs up and a like and have fun playing this game.